Hello and welcome. Today, let's explore together how to approach repetitive negative thinking patterns that can feel impossible to escape. If you've ever found yourself caught in endless loops of worry, self-criticism, or anxious thoughts that seem to replay without resolution, please know that you're certainly not alone in this experience. We'll be discussing scientifically proven strategies based on the latest neuroscience research that can help you break free from these challenging thought patterns and develop a healthier relationship with your mind. The landscape of mental health research has been transformed by our growing understanding of repetitive negative thinking. Current research in neuroscience has revealed fascinating insights about how our brains process and maintain patterns of rumination, worry, and negative thought loops. In 2024, a landmark study conducted by a major research institution examined brain connectivity patterns in individuals experiencing depression and anxiety. Using advanced neuroimaging techniques, researchers discovered something remarkable about how rumination-focused cognitive behavioral therapy actually changes the brain. The study found that when people received specialized therapy targeting repetitive negative thinking patterns, their brain scans showed significant reductions in connectivity between the left posterior cingulate cortex and the right inferior frontal gyrus. These changes had impressive effect sizes of 0.84 and 0.73 respectively, meaning the improvements were both statistically significant and clinically meaningful. What's particularly encouraging is that these brain changes directly correlated with participants' reports of reduced frequency and intensity of repetitive negative thoughts. This breakthrough research builds on a comprehensive meta-analysis that examined the effectiveness of different therapeutic approaches for repetitive negative thinking. The analysis found that rumination-focused cognitive behavioral therapy significantly outperformed other interventions, achieving an effect size of 0.76. To put this in perspective, this specialized approach was more effective than standard cognitive behavioral therapy, which had an effect size of 0.57, mindfulness-based cognitive therapy at 0.42, and medication approaches at just 0.14. This tells us something incredibly important about the value of targeting repetitive thinking patterns specifically rather than using general therapeutic approaches. Advanced brain imaging studies have also revealed the neural mechanisms underlying repetitive negative thinking. Researchers have identified that these patterns involve dysfunction in what's called the default mode network, particularly in regions including the dorsal medial prefrontal cortex. The default mode network is active when we're not focused on external tasks, and when it becomes overactive or dysregulated, it can contribute to persistent negative thinking patterns. Understanding this brain science helps explain why repetitive negative thinking can feel so automatic and difficult to control. Another significant breakthrough came from research examining metacognitive beliefs about thinking itself. A comprehensive study found that people's beliefs about their negative thoughts significantly predict how severe their rumination patterns become. Specifically, beliefs that repetitive negative thinking is uncontrollable and dangerous were most consistently associated with persistent rumination. This finding has revolutionized treatment approaches because it suggests we need to address not just the content of negative thoughts, but also our beliefs about the thinking process itself. Perhaps most encouraging for accessibility, recent research has demonstrated that internet-delivered interventions targeting repetitive negative thinking can achieve effectiveness similar to face-to-face therapy. A rigorous study involving over 100 adults showed significant improvements in repetitive negative thinking through carefully designed digital interventions. This research proves that evidence-based treatments can be successfully delivered through various modalities while maintaining therapeutic effectiveness. Recent investigations have also examined how mindfulness training affects the brain networks involved in repetitive negative thinking. Meta-analytic evidence suggests that mindfulness practices strengthen cross-network connectivity between the default mode network, the salience network, and the frontoparietal control network. This enhanced connectivity appears to provide a mechanism for interrupting rumination cycles and developing better attentional control over repetitive thought patterns. Now, let's explore the practical, scientifically backed methods you can use to address repetitive negative thinking. These techniques have been carefully selected based on their research evidence and their safety for self-application. The first method is called functional analysis, and it's fundamental to understanding your unique pattern of repetitive thinking. This technique involves systematically observing and recording your rumination episodes over the course of 1 week. You'll want to keep a simple log noting what situations, emotions, or thoughts preceded each episode of repetitive negative thinking. Pay particular attention to what happens after rumination. Does it provide temporary relief, increase your distress, or lead to specific behaviors? This awareness-building exercise is crucial because it transforms unconscious automatic patterns into conscious choices. Research shows that this foundational step increases treatment effectiveness by approximately 40% because it helps people recognize that they have more control over their thinking patterns than they initially believed. The second technique is the rumination interruption protocol. When you notice repetitive negative thoughts beginning to cycle, the goal is to immediately engage in a concrete, present-moment activity that requires your attention. This might involve counting backwards from 100 by sevens, describing 5 objects in your environment in detail, or engaging in some form of physical movement like taking a walk around your home. The key principle here is shifting from abstract rumination to concrete engagement with your immediate environment. This technique works because rumination typically involves abstract, conceptual thinking about problems, while concrete activities engage different neural networks in your brain. Brain imaging studies show that practicing this interruption consistently for 2 weeks helps build new neural pathways that can compete with established rumination circuits. The third method involves alternative response training. This builds directly on your functional analysis by helping you develop specific alternative behaviors to replace habitual rumination. For example, if your analysis revealed that rumination typically follows work stress, you might practice a sequence of deep breathing exercises followed by a 5-minute walk instead of allowing your mind to spiral into negative thinking. If rumination tends to occur before bed, you could substitute guided imagery or progressive muscle relaxation. The brain learns these new patterns through repetition and consistency, so research suggests aiming for 21 days of consistent practice to establish what neuroscientists call neural automation, the point where new responses begin to feel natural and require less conscious effort. The fourth technique is detached mindfulness practice, which comes from metacognitive therapy approaches. This involves learning to observe repetitive negative thoughts as mental events rather than facts that require immediate solutions. When you notice rumination beginning, you might say to yourself, "I'm having the thought that this situation is terrible," rather than, "This situation is terrible." Or you might notice, "My mind is telling the story that I've made a mistake," rather than, "I've made a mistake." This linguistic shift creates psychological distance between you and your thoughts, helping you recognize that thoughts are mental events that come and go rather than accurate reflections of reality. Research shows that even brief daily practice of detached mindfulness significantly reduces what psychologists call thought-action fusion and decreases the intensity of rumination episodes. The fifth method involves concrete thinking exercises designed to counter the abstract nature of rumination. When you find yourself caught in negative thought loops, practice focusing on specific, sensory details of your current environment. Describe exactly what you can see, hear, smell, and feel in this moment. Notice the texture of objects around you, the temperature of the air, the sounds in your environment. This technique also involves learning to shift from asking why questions, which tend to fuel rumination, to asking what and how questions, which promote practical problem solving. Studies show that concrete thinking training has an effect size of 0.53 for reducing repetitive negative thoughts, making it a moderately effective intervention that can be particularly helpful when combined with other techniques. The sixth method is metacognitive restructuring, which targets the beliefs about rumination itself. This involves systematically examining and challenging thoughts like, "I need to figure this out by thinking about it more," or, "This thinking is helpful and necessary." You can create a detailed list comparing rumination's actual costs versus its imagined benefits. Many people believe rumination helps them solve problems or prevents bad things from happening, but research consistently shows that rumination typically maintains problems rather than solving them. Practice responding to metacognitive triggers with more balanced statements like, "Rumination hasn't solved this problem before, so more thinking is unlikely to help," or, "I can handle uncertainty without endless analysis." This approach targets the meta-level beliefs that maintain negative thinking patterns rather than just addressing the surface content of the thoughts. To summarize what we discussed today, here are the key points to remember. First, repetitive negative thinking involves specific brain networks, particularly the default mode network, that can be scientifically retrained through targeted interventions. The research shows us that these patterns are not permanent or unchangeable. Second, functional analysis is a crucial first step that transforms unconscious thought patterns into conscious choices, giving you much more control over your mental processes than you might have realized. Third, concrete activities like counting, describing your environment, or physical movement can effectively interrupt abstract negative thinking loops by engaging different neural networks. Fourth, detached mindfulness creates psychological distance between you and your thoughts, helping you recognize that thoughts are mental events rather than facts about reality. Fifth, examining and challenging your metacognitive beliefs about thinking itself addresses the underlying assumptions that maintain repetitive patterns. And sixth, alternative responses must be practiced consistently to build new neural pathways. Consistency is key to creating lasting change in your brain's default patterns. What I hope you'll take away from today is that your brain's remarkable neuroplasticity allows you to break free from even long-standing patterns of repetitive negative thinking. The techniques we've discussed are all backed by rigorous scientific research and have helped many people develop a healthier relationship with their thoughts. You might start with the method that resonates most strongly with you, perhaps functional analysis to better understand your patterns, or the interruption protocol if you're looking for an immediate tool to use when rumination begins. Remember that change takes time and patience with yourself. These patterns likely developed over many years, so it's reasonable to expect that developing new patterns will also take time. But the research gives us confidence that with consistent practice, meaningful change is not only possible but likely. The brain changes we discussed earlier show us that these interventions create real, measurable differences in neural connectivity and functioning. If today's discussion provided any support or insight, please consider hitting the like button. If you'd like to continue learning about mental health and neuroscience together, please subscribe to the channel. May your hearts feel a little lighter, and may you find increasing freedom from the patterns that no longer serve you. Thank you so much for listening until the end today.